James Sumarac is a devoted martial arts teacher and consummate professional holding an 8th Dan in Goju-Ryu Karate. He is also a master instructor of Chinese internal systems, author of 7 texts on martial and healing arts, and doctor of traditional Asian medicine. What kept James focused on the martial and healing arts journey for 50 years? You are about to find out. Kyoshi, thank you for agreeing to this interview and sharing your wisdom on the occasion of your 50 years involvement in the martial arts. The aim of our discussion is to help martial artists at all levels to understand the martial arts from the perspective of someone that has devoted their life to its mastery. Let's begin with what motivated you to start karate.
Well, I guess my initial motivation would have been around the time when I was 14 years of age. My father had just passed away, so my older brother took on the role as the father figure. So he thought that he should take me away and spend some quality time with me. And he did that quite often on fishing and camping trips. The only problem is that most of his friends were all alcohol dependent. And what happened one trip was they left me at a camping site at Eildon, at a place called Burnt Creek. I remember it clearly. And they set up the camp and went off to the pub. And in the meantime, I had caught a large brown trout on one of the lines. And when they returned, it was dark and I was cold and hungry. And I kind of told them off, I think. I must have said something like, you know, while you bums have been at the pub, look what I caught. And I showed him this huge trout. And his friend, I can't remember his name, but he was a Polish man. He was a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. And he said to me, what line did you catch it on? And I said, well, this line. He said, well, that's my line. He said, that's my fish. So I refused to give him the fish. So what happened was somehow a conflict had developed and I was thrown into the freezing cold Eildon Weir. And all the drunken members of the group all started fighting amongst each other. And I remember sitting around the campfire naked with a blanket wrapped around me, thinking, I'm never, ever going to let that happen to me again. And I think that was my greatest motivation. Interestingly enough, I presented a eulogy at my brother's funeral about 10 years ago, and the gentleman was present at the funeral. And after the funeral, he came to me and he said, have you ever forgiven me for throwing you in the Eildon Weir? And I said, of course I've forgiven you. I said, I never forgot it, but I have forgiven you. And he said, well, by the look of you, he said, it seems like it was a good thing to do.
Could you tell us about your early karate background?
My early karate background, I think I started jiu-jitsu around 1971 in Heidelberg, Melbourne. And I did that for about a year or so. Then around 1972, I started in the Goju Kai organisation under a wonderful teacher called Max Fabris in Preston. And that was part of, at the time, it was part of Sensei Tino Ceberano's organisation. And I think I got to about green belt then, and I decided that I was going to go on a 2-year world trip that was going to start in Japan. So Tino Ceberano very kindly gave me the address of the Goju Kai Hombu in Nishiogi-kubu, just on the outskirts of Tokyo. So I set off thinking, well, on my way on this world trip, I might spend a couple of weeks in Japan doing some karate. Little did I know that I would spend a couple of freezing cold winters there.
You had a chance meeting with Professor Tadako Otsuka, who later became your teacher, and that relationship spanned for the lifetime of your career. Can you tell us how that came about?
Well, once I arrived in Tokyo, I realised that people didn't speak English. And I went to the reception of the hotel that I was staying at, and I gave them the address of the Gojukai headquarters of, which was also the home of Gogen Yamaguchi, nicknamed the Cat. And the receptionist spoke a little English. He called a taxi and he assured me that the taxi driver would take me to the dojo. Well, the taxi driver, in his wisdom, thought, well, I know another Goju-Ryu dojo that is so much more close by, so I might take you there. So he just thought I was looking at Goju-Ryu karate in general and not a specific dojo. So he took me into the direction of Master Otsuka's dojo, which was Goju Kenshusei Shinkan in Shintomichu in Tokyo. I had no idea. He dropped me off in the vicinity on the block of the dojo, and he had a lot of trouble locating the dojo, so he just let me out of the taxi. And about the same time, there was a torrential downpour. So I was walking around the streets, you know, looking for this karate dojo and asking people, and nobody knew, nobody spoke English. Then out of the blue, this man called Shuji Sakuma, who actually entered my life a little later, once again by chance, he approached me and said, are you looking for something? And I said, yes, I'm looking for this address. He said, oh, no. He said, there is a karate dojo around here somewhere. He said, well, let's try and find it. So we walked around. In the meantime, I was getting wetter and wetter. And finally, we found it. And Otsuka Sensei opened the door of his dojo. He literally grabbed me and dragged me in out of the rain, said goodbye to Shuji, sat me down, dried my hair. I had hair in those days. He dried my hair. He changed my jacket. His wife made me tea, some Japanese cakes. That may have taken a whole of 5 minutes. Then finally he said, who are you? And what are you doing here? And the way he handled that encounter has lasted with me for more than 50 years. It's left an incredible impression on me that you never leave anybody in bother or in trouble. So that's how I met Otsuka Sensei. And once I told him that I was looking for the Gojukai headquarters, he said, wrong dojo. He said, but I will take you. And he put me in his tiny little Subaru, probably a 1960s Subaru. I could barely get into it. And he drove me right across Tokyo to Nishiogi-kubu, which was a long way in this rain. But we finally got there. And interestingly enough, Gogen Yamaguchi, we sat in Gogen Yamaguchi's office, and there was this heated discussion going on about Goju-Ryu that I had no idea. I couldn't understand anything, but I would have loved to have understood now what they were discussing. But basically, Otsuka Sensei left me, and I stayed there at the dojo.
How and when were you introduced to the Chinese martial arts?
Well, the Chinese martial arts, well, it's no secret that the Chinese martial arts have influenced karate in so many different ways, particularly in Goju-Ryu. White Crane has been a huge influence. In Japan, I became interested in Chinese martial arts mostly through Otsuka Sensei's personal passion and prompting. He promised me that as I grew older, that I wouldn't lose power, that I would actually increase my power in martial arts. And, you know, being a 19-year-old, I thought, I had no idea what he was talking about, and I was in total disbelief. He said, as you get older, he said, if you train properly, if you train in Chinese martial arts, Tai Chi, Xingyi, Bagua, to supplement your Goju-Ryu karate, he said, you will actually become stronger. And it has been the case. It has been the case. He was totally right. And I was quite fortunate that I followed his direction.
Kyoshi, you train and teach many disciplines: Tai Chi, Bagua, Xingyi, Goju-ryu karate, and others I'm sure that many practitioners may not even know about. Do you change the way you move or feel in different arts?
Well, cosmetically, they do look different. But quite frankly, I don't feel any different. The key is, no matter what art that you're training or teaching in, you have to consider the underpinning principle. When you're doing the form, you use your intention, you use imagery tools to power your body the appropriate way, depending on the discipline.
You often talk about perfect technique. What do you consider perfect technique?
Well, I believe we are always in pursuit of the perfect technique. And I just consider that a perfect technique is an athlete of any discipline really taking the fundamentals of that discipline to the limits of their potential. If your body and your mind is integrated, a sophisticated technique or an advanced technique in appearance is actually a basic technique that's performed really well with perfect timing, perfect control, distance, etc.
What place does tension have in the martial arts?
Well, there's nothing actually wrong with tension, providing that it's only the amount required to perform the movement or the technique per se. I believe one of the secrets of combat is that you would create tension in your opponent, but maintain calm yourself. As a young boy and as a young man, I always worked physically hard, so my body was naturally strong. So I've had to fight with this. All my martial arts career is not to use my physical strength, but to do things without so much force and to be able to control my tension.
You are celebrating your 50th year in the martial arts. Is there any advice you can give aficionados with less experience?
I feel old when you say that figure. I guess my advice really would be that the Chinese have an expression is that you need to eat bitter. Eat bitter means that you need to sweat, you need to sacrifice, and you need to train hard. That's actually the meaning of Kung Fu. Kung Fu means to work hard at your desired discipline. So you can be your Kung Fu can be good in cooking, your Kung Fu can be good in martial arts. Martial arts is not a direct path. There's always obstacles, there's distractions along the way. It's really important, I guess, to find a good teacher and good mentors to keep you on that path. You may need to often retrace your journey, come back to things that you thought you understood, and you'll find that you'll discover deeper truths. You may even discover that you've evolved more than you thought you did. Some advice that Master Otsuka gave me in 1983 or 1984 when I told him that I wanted to become a professional karate teacher. I remember he sat me down and he said, first advice is don't rely on martial arts as your primary income. He said, have another career where you can make the money that you need to support your family. He said, that way your martial arts will still be your joy, your passion, your hobby. So that's something that I think is useful advice. I recall the first time I went to China was in 1982, and I stayed at the Beijing Institute for 5 weeks, but during that time I wanted to travel to Zhenjiagou. Zhenjiagou is the Chen village, the birthplace of Chen style Tai Chi, which was the original Tai Chi, that Otsuka Sensei assured me was a great influence on Goju Ryu. So I went to Chenjiao, and I remember sitting down with all these very famous Chen style masters, and one of them said, "Do you want to ask us something?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "What are you supposed to feel when you're doing Tai Chi? Are you supposed to feel something special?" And I remember the translator rattled on and rattled on and rattled on for several minutes. And then finally he said, "Yes, the master says you have to feel comfortable." So I've never forgotten that word, comfortable. I think it's a really important word, not just in martial arts, but in all aspects of our life, that we have to feel comfortable what we're doing.
What do you consider important aspects for a teacher?
For teaching martial arts, to be a good teacher, I think primarily, don't be an imposter. You need to train hard to develop the skills. Be aware of your development, your own personal development. In order to do that, you need to be constantly inspired by people at a greater level than you. I found that extremely important. Humbling, but important in my own development. The next stage, I think, is to codify that knowledge that you've acquired, so that when you teach it, it's easy to teach, and it's taught in a fun way and an interesting way, so people can absorb it. Particularly children. Children don't want anything too serious. They want things to be taught in a way that they can relate to. And lastly, I guess, is to find a balance between the physical skill development and the underpinning philosophies of martial arts. It's only then that you can create a complete martial arts student that can then climb on your shoulders and become even greater than you.
Are there any, or what is the secret to martial arts that teachers conceal?
The teachers conceal. I don't think a good teacher shouldn't really conceal anything. That's the way that I was brought up. My teacher said you have to teach everything. But in saying that, you have to be ready to hear it. So things may appear as if they're being concealed from you, and that is only because you're not ready. You're not at that point in your development to be able to receive it. So, yeah. But in saying that, there has been a few things that my teacher has said, don't teach this to anybody outside our organisation or outside our dojo. So yeah, look, to be totally 100% honest with you, there are a few things that I have kept to myself. But I don't like the word secret, I prefer the word keys. So the keys are really entirely based on your acquired knowledge and effort in your personal training to gain perfection and expression of the fundamentals, the basics of your system of training. Yeah, so there is secrets and there isn't secrets.
What do you think is the most important thing you have received out of 50 years in the martial arts?
So much. But as a young boy and as a young man, I think I doubted myself and I lacked a lot of confidence. So martial arts has given me the ability to be able to confront life's challenges. And I always maintain that no matter who you are and where you are, you're always going to be confronted with a challenge. And I think martial arts helps you to address that. with strength and vitality, and in some cases with joy. People have different powers in their lives that drives them, and I think that we all need a vehicle, or we need tools to direct that power. Mine just so happened to be martial arts. I don't really believe in accidents, but yeah. And it's led me to a meaningful life, and I have a lot of fulfillment, a lot of satisfaction from that 50 years of martial arts.
Why do teachers of the same systems look so different, even teachers studying under the same master?
That's a very good question. It often bamboozled me. And I used to get quite frustrated actually when I travelled to Japan and different seniors would show me the same form and the same techniques a variety of ways. But later I come to the realisation that it was actually a good thing. It was a treat, because they actually showed you a variety of doing the same or using that same principle a different way, but with their personal perspective. Also, I think that when people first introduced to the martial arts, they're taught in a less refined manner. As their experience, their skill, their maturity gains, there's more refinement that's added to their training, and this can give a different appearance. So if a student trains for a short amount of time with a teacher, or comes at a different stage in that particular teacher's development, things can look very, very different. I think this has been the case particularly with all systems of martial arts. The one that comes particularly to mind with me is Aikido. Morihei Ueshiba, the founder of Aikido, he had a long history of training, and he evolved so quickly as a martial artist and become a brilliant martial artist. But people that train with me at different stages of his development all look totally different. Often when I'm teaching internationally and in the USA or in Europe, and this has happened to me a couple of times, people that I haven't seen for a number of years have said to me in private, "Gee, you've really evolved in the way you're doing this or you're doing that." And that makes me feel so good, because I don't feel it myself, but other people can notice. And I think that's the most important thing for a martial artist, is that you have to be continually evolving. If you stagnate, it's not good for you, and it's not good for your students.
You are also a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine. How did that come about?
I think that came about initially through Otsuka Sensei's prompting. When I lived in Japan, we had traditional Chinese medical doctors, bone setters, masseurs come to the dojo and actually teach workshops. And I never really embraced it much, because I was probably too young and silly to really appreciate it. But Otsuka Sensei would say to me, if you're really serious about the martial arts, you have to understand about the healing arts. And yeah, he would say things like, one who learns how to harm must first learn how to heal. And I never quite got it till many years later. It probably took me 10 years, I think, after I returned back to Australia, where I started to do some serious study in traditional Chinese medicine. In traditional Chinese medicine, it teaches you that man and women are multi-dimensional beings, and that is that we function not just on a physical level, but also on an emotional level, a mental level, and a spiritual level. All those levels need to be in harmony for us to maintain our health, our overall health. I think this understanding has been an enormous help in my own personal training and also in my teaching.
Could you tell us how you used your martial arts skill in working with children with special needs?
Yes, I think the control that I developed through martial arts and my body work has been very useful in professional development workshops that I've conducted in special settings and hospitals where I've worked with staff that deal with physically challenging situations where a person may be having a psychotic episode and they need to restrain that person, remove that person from the room. How do you do that? It's very, very difficult to do that gently and safely. Not just safely for the person, for the student, the patient, but also for yourself. You know, it's important that you're not hurt because they're trying to hurt you, but you can't hurt them. You have to show control. So I think that was probably one of the most important things I've done in my life. I developed a wonderful rapport, particularly with children with autism. Some of the teachers and staff did joke that perhaps I was on the autism spectrum. That's why I was able to relate to them so well. Not sure about that, but anyway. It was a very satisfying stage in my life.
You are the proud owner of Wu Lin Retreat, a purpose-built martial and healing arts centre, and also your home. Can you tell me how this came about?
Well, in Chinese, Wu means martial, and Lin means forest, as is Shaolin, small forest. And I guess it's all a part of my wife Xiaomei and my vision that began more than 20 years ago to build and to create a centre where martial artists could congregate, train martial arts and evolve together. Since then, we have conducted so many workshops. We've had international presenters. We've had Chen Yunqing has been here 6 times, I think. We've had Master Zhu Tensai, he's been here 3 times. We've had my Goju-Ryu teacher, Master Noguchi, has been here 3 times. The seniors of Goju Kensho like Toshio Morita Sensei have been here 3 times. There's been an incredible list of international teachers that have been here at Wu Lin Retreat and presented their arts. And I guess we've always wanted a place where people can stay together, where they can accommodate together, they can eat together and train together. I think that's a wonderful thing in the martial arts.
What would you consider highlights in your prestigious martial arts career?
Once again, so many things, but I guess at the top of the list would be all my 5 children, Jasmine, Sasha, Lila, Casimir and Lazar, all gaining their black belt Dan gradings, has been a real highlight of my martial arts career. In addition to that, I guess gaining a Bubushi teaching license from my teacher Tadahiko Otsuka. I'm one of the only non-Japanese people from his organisation ever to obtain that license. Another highlight, I guess, is the amount of time that I spent with Master Chen Yunqing. Not only did he adopt me as his brother, but I also assisted him in 3 huge tours of the US, plus the times that he's been here in and around Australia. That's been a wonderful thing, and we had some wonderful times, we had some wonderful experiences together. Also, Master Zhu Tensai has been my primary Chen style Tai Chi teacher, a wonderful man, a wonderful teacher. He's been here so many times, and I've followed him to other countries of the world as well to study his expertise. And I suppose we have done so many training tours of Japan and Taiwan so many times, probably more than 8 times in each country, where we've met and trained with so many different masters, and so many people have come from overseas countries to join us in this experience. That's been absolutely fabulous. One of the highlights, I think, of those Taiwan tours some 8 years ago was meeting and training with my white crane teacher, Master Zheng Ying. He has been a man that has filled a lot of the gaps in my training. He only passed away last year at the age of 88, and I developed an incredible rapport with him. And that's something that remains with me every day. Additionally, receiving my 8th Dan grading from my teacher, my Goju-Ryu teacher, Mochiro Noguchi, a couple of years ago was a fantastic treat to me, and I didn't realise how much it meant to me till after it happened. And so I really honour and respect that grading from Noguchi Sensei.
So Kiyoshi, any regrets?
Oh, regrets are always hard ones, aren't they? I guess what comes to mind really is probably a regret that I never learned to speak Japanese more fluently than what I would have liked to have. I mean, dojo terminology and words, I'm fairly comfortable, but I would have liked to have been able to speak Japanese more fluently, and I think that certainly frustrated my teachers over the decades that I trained with them. Also Taiwanese, I would have liked to have learned to speak Taiwanese. I tried. My wife's Taiwanese, for heaven's sake. But I guess I was just busy doing other things. But if I gave some advice to anybody, I would say, learn the language of your teacher, if it's not your native language.
What are your plans for the future?
My future plans, I recall in 1982 when I first told Oscar Sensei, he happened to be in Australia, he was in my home, and I shared with him my plan that I wanted to be a professional martial artist. I want to dedicate my life to studying and teaching martial arts. And he said a couple of things of great interest. One was, make sure you have a mentor or mentors. And I never quite understood what he meant. And he elaborated a little bit, and he said, find somebody older than you, male or female, not necessarily martial artists, but that can give you advice and mentor you along the way. And I never quite understood at the beginning, but then later, that was kind of, what do you call it, an accidental, what do you call it? It's a...
Serendipity?
Serendipity perhaps, but there was a few people older than me that came on the scene and filled that role for me. He also said something strange too. He said, he asked me a question. He was always testing me, and he said, "Do you want to become a good martial artist and a good teacher?" And I said, "Of course." And he said, "Well, that's not good enough." He said, "You have to strive to be a great martial artist and a great teacher." And those words still resonate in my mind. So I guess I will continue with my original plan, and that is to train myself, to mentor my students, to honour my teachers, in particular Master Noguchi, who's almost turned 80 now, and he'll be retiring shortly to his log cabin with a trout stream in the backyard up in the mountains in northern Japan that I visited on one occasion that I look forward to visiting again in the future. So I wish to honour him and help him in any way he can, in any way that I can help him. I'm also working on my 7th text on martial arts, and that is primarily about white crane boxing and how it's influenced Goju-ryu. Additionally to that, I will continue in our vegetable garden, our fruit orchard, and hope to spend some quality time with my grandchildren.
Kiyoshi, thank you very much for sharing your wealth of experience and wisdom with us today.
It was an honour. Thank you. I would like to conclude with a poem by Tsuraka Masami that I think may be relevant to your last question. We are beginners when we are born. We are beginners when we go to school. We are beginners when we leave our parents' home. We are beginners when we marry. We are beginners when we have our own children. And we are beginners when we retire. So don't follow your ego, but your responsibility at those stages of your life.